guys, Brandon here. Today we're going to be looking at my Wizard Hellraiser. So I know I posted a video a while back on this amp. One of the only ones that I've seen out there on it, to be honest with you. I did use a mimiq pedal, did some reamping stuff, double tracked it with that, kind of as an experiment, but I did want to do a raw video talking about this amp. So this is a new entry from Wizard, and really known to be the highest gain offering amp that Rick at Wizard offers. This amp in the EQ range, to me, tonally sounds a little bit more like a modern classic than like an MTL does. However, way more gain on tap. As you can see here, it has several different gain controls. We'll just kind of talk through this real quick. So you have depth, presence, bass, middle, treble, same deal as you'll have pretty much whatever amp you go to in the modern era. Then it has a saturation switch, which will add a little more gain. And then it has gain 3, 2, and 1. So each of these gains affect the amp a little bit differently. One is a little more low range, one a little more mid, and then the high highs. I spent a ton of time tweaking this amp to find what I really liked on it. One thing I will say is, unlike the MTL, this does not have a sweep knob. So again, a little more like the modern classic. So with that being said, like the Wizard mid-range is definitely a little bit different. Like I've said in other videos, it reminds me a little bit of VHT Fryette, so a little more 300 hertz, and then obviously some of the beefiest amps you can come across. So to compensate for that, I did set the bass and depth a little bit low. However, you will find that this gets across as much bass and depth as you would need, even with these both set at like 3. I didn't trim off a ton of low end in this video. Reason being is because I want people to actually hear what a Wizard sounds like kind of in the room. I know a lot of other people have had recordings of these, trim off a ton of low end, and then you don't really get that punch. So on that dual track clip, if you really want to see what it sounds like, go into a car, crank it up. I promise you that is about as close as you can get to what a Wizard actually sounds and feels like in a room, because it's just crushing. Tell you what, I'm going to play some riffs, go through it, and yeah, this is my Mark Shaquan custom. It is in C standard. Let's go. So as you can hear, this thing does have the normal Wizard thing going on. Super tight, super raw, uncompressed. Can hear every single messed up note that I did in that entire passage there. I do want to comment here. So there are, I forgot to talk about it, there are bright switches on the back. Every single Wizard I've owned, I've kind of set the bright switches and kind of forgot about them. So this one has 2 different bright switches. One is affecting gain 2, one is affecting gain 1. Gain 2 is at 6, gain 1 is about at 4. That's how I like it set. It kind of, the bright switches just kind of affect the slope that the high end is at. I like that there. Other thing I like too in my wizards is, I'm sure you guys have noticed this in my videos, that I like the presence cranked way up at 8. Definitely gets rid of some of that dark stuff. So, I mean, you can hear, let's... So you can hear it almost instantly drops off when you mess with that. That's about where I like it. You know, if it's too much for you and you don't want it to totally disappear, you can always just EQ after the fact and take a little bit out. This does not have that. I'm not EQing a bunch, so you guys can hear what this actually sounds like. Mess with the mid range a little bit. And I mean, about 5 is the most I would have it. Like if you do want to go for more like a Marshall-y like tone, this really isn't that. I know a lot of guys talk about wizards and they're like, modded Marshall and stuff. These amps are more than that. They definitely have their own thing going on. Like if I had to put a thing on it, it's like VHT high watt kind of circuit with a little bit of Marshall flavor in there, but it's less like a Marshall than more, if that makes any sense. These boost switches affect the gain level, so I mean you can turn them off and on, and you can hear the drop offs there. I literally spent a pretty good amount of time, probably more than like a couple days, tweaking these knobs and set them to exactly the way I like. Some guys like setting gain 3, which is like the lower frequencies. They like setting that up and then kind of rolling off the top. Not really my deal, but you can see a couple other videos out there doing that. Like I said, there's pretty limited videos on that Hellraiser. There also is another gain switch over here, which just takes it to a little bit more clanky territory. Again, not 100% my deal, because if you're playing that on your own, like it can sound cool, but once you start having multiple guitars, it just becomes too much, in my own opinion. But to each their own. So I'm gonna play some more riffs. Oh yeah, like the MTL, it does have a pull switch, so you can kind of scoop out things a little bit more. So check this out. I guess I'll play some riffs with that kind of set that way. If you are doing the pull shift, I would turn up the treble a little bit just to compensate for it so the amp doesn't get super dark, but let's hear that. Yeah, it sounds pretty damn metal. No, that might be a little much for some people, but yeah, pretty badass. I'm gonna set it back, push that in, put the treble back. Yeah, I mean, doing those back to back, you can hear obviously less scooped, more scooped. Um, Depending what kind of mood I'm in, I guess can wind up pulling those because it does sound super metal with that engaged. Anyway, I'll play a couple more riffs and we'll get out of here. Well, that was a miss right there. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to get out of here. Let me know what you think. If you like the content, subscribe. I'll have more metal stuff and more amps to demo. See you around.